I'm always excited when I find little tiny antiques and relics. And today, April 1st, well now April 2nd, just after midnight. Ooh, I'm 60 years old today. Anyways, I got a collection of buttons and marbles and various things from my friend Gil Alberg. And there were 5 in particular that pertain specifically to Michigan. And these are, you're looking at pictures, or scans I should say, of these while I'm telling you about them. These 5 buttons pertain to the military in Michigan. And in fact, the 3 buttons are from the Michigan Militia, not the current militia, but a long time ago. There's another one marked MSH, which is for Military Soldier Hospital, which was located in Grand Rapids. I don't know if it still is or not. And then there's one that has an AS on it, and that is from the Civil War, and I believe that one pertained to Michigan also, but I can't say for sure. The other ones I know pertained to Michigan. And so I'm hoping that the material I'm going to share with you is not copyrighted, but I want to tell you a little bit about the Michigan Militia, and then the Soldiers' Home, Michigan Soldiers' Home. I said military, but it was Michigan Soldiers' Home. But first let's talk a little bit about Michigan's early organized militias. The history of Michigan National Guards is one of long and honorable service that predates the state itself. As one of Michigan's first settlements, Detroit is looked upon as the birthplace of the early Michigan militia. The first indication of an effort to organize a militia is the reference in the Cadillac Papers of a proposal made by Sir D. Lamoth. His proposal, dated November 13, 1708, called for the forming of 4 companies of savages to act as a militia for the colony. People opposed this idea because they were afraid that if the savages became educated in the ways of warfare, they would become formidable enemies. The first evidence of an organized formal militia is in the mention of the participation of the 1st Regiment of Wayne County in a parade in Detroit on May 11, 1803. However, neither the occasion for the parade nor the strength of the regiment was ever recorded. On June 30, 1805, the act organizing the territory of Michigan took effect, with General William Hull as the first governor. Although the act provided for the creation of a militia consisting of 18 to 45-year-old males, organization never proceeded further than being placed on paper at that time. Now the following I'm going to give in a list-like fashion, which is a history of the Michigan National Guard, which was in the beginning the Michigan Militia. So, as I've said already, Michigan's early organized militias predated the state. Michigan's first militia, I said, was organized at Detroit, and the Michigan National Guard's proud history of service to the state and nation is built at these humble beginnings. In the War of 1812 and the Black Hawk War, Michigan militiamen fought for the United States. Hardship during the march to the Mississippi took its toll on Michigan's participation in the Black Hawk War. The Toledo War. Long before the War of Words ever started between Wolverine and Buckeye fans, before Michigan football, or even a state of Michigan, Michigan's territorial militia marched towards the Ohio border, prepared for battle in 1835. The Patriot War. Following the Toledo War and statehood, a band of U.S. citizens attempted to gain control of part of Canada, then under British control. Michigan's militia became involved and played a role in keeping Canada intact. War with Mexico. Michigan's militia served to protect the state and in the battle area during the War with Mexico. The conflict raged from 1846 until 1848. The Civil War. President Lincoln exclaimed, "Thank God for Michigan," when told of the arrival of the 1st Michigan Volunteers in answer to his call for troops at the start of the Civil War. Eventually, 23% of the Michigan's male population would fight for the Union cause. Post-Civil War. Spurred on by the events of the Franco-Prussian War, the state legislature formed the Michigan State Troops. Spanish-American War. Michigan's troops answered the call for the Spanish-American War, volunteering almost to the man. The copper strikes. Protesting working conditions, copper miners went on strike in 1913. Things turned ugly, and Houghton's sheriff called for Michigan National Guard assistance. Mexican border duty. The Michigan National Guard units saw duty along the Mexican border during 1916. And in World War I, the National Guardsmen of the Michigan and Wisconsin formed the 32nd Red Army Division, so named because of their quick advances through German lines. Labor troubles in Flint. The governor called on the Michigan National Guard to help restore order in Flint in the wake of labor disputes there. Preparing for World War II. The U.S. military underwent a major reorganization in 1940, and under these auspices, several Michigan National Guard units were mobilized for training, and they did not return home until 1945 and 46. Michigan National Guard in World War II. Units of the Michigan National Guard served with distinction in both European and Pacific theaters during World War II. Reorganizing the Guard post-World War II. After World War II, the War Department deactivated National Guard units. Returning Guardsmen had to establish new organizations. The Korean conflict. Michigan National Guard members were again called for federal duty during the Korean conflict. The tumultuous 60s. Foreign and domestic crises, both natural and man-made, are the hallmarks of the 1960s, and the Michigan National Guard was kept very busy by them. Post-Vietnam. Significant changes faced the Michigan National Guard during the period following the Vietnam conflict. The Persian Gulf conflict. Over 1,600 Michigan National Guard members served during the Persian Gulf conflict. 13 units from across the state participated. Post-Desert Storm. Members of Michigan's National Guard units have been busy with a number of mobilizations since the end of the Persian Gulf conflict. And the dawn of a new millennium. The Michigan National Guard is adapting to the changing security environments of today's world. The events of September 11, 2001 have reinforced the Guard's sense of purpose. It's also interesting to note that Michigan troops fought in Russia at the close of World War I. Michigan troops were sent to Russia to reopen the Eastern Front. And guarding Michigan's World War II home front, with the federalizing of the Michigan National Guard, the Michigan State Troops were formed to fill the void. Now I want to back up just a moment to the War of 1812 and give a little more detail on that, and then the Black Hawk War, and then the Civil War. But the War of 1812, when it broke out, the population in the territory of Michigan was less than 5,000 people. An acting territorial governor, Atwater, enrolled about 200 men in the militia, and they participated in General Hull's Canadian campaign and were involved in the effort to capture Sandwich. The campaign was doomed to failure, and the invading force was captured. The Michigan Militia was paroled, thus ending its participation in the War of 1812. Now, the Black Hawk War. In 1832, Michigan men again answered the call to arms. This time, it was for an Indian war, the Black Hawk War. Michigan played only a small part in this campaign, but did call out an order to service a regiment of militia that included the 1st Regiment of Michigan Militia, the Detroit City Guards, and a company of mounted volunteers, or dragoons. The troops never saw combat, however. Exposure and the hardship of the march to the Mississippi River, coupled with an outbreak of the Asiatic cholera, took a heavy toll, and sickness and some deaths were reported. The Black Hawk War was the last campaign in which the Detroit City Guards participated. And now, the Civil War. The surrender of Fort Sumter on April 15, 1861, was startling news throughout the county, and Michigan soon received the President's call for volunteers. The state was asked to furnish one regiment of infantry, fully armed, clothed, and equipped, to aid the federal government in suppressing the rebellion. And although the state treasury was not in a condition to meet this request, subscription made the necessary amount available, and 10 companies were at once mobilized. The President's call for Michigan troops was promptly met by the mustering in of the 1st Regiment and its early movement to the seat of the war in Virginia. In the meantime, the War Department authorized Michigan to raise 3 other regiments, but at the same time stated that it was important to reduce rather than to increase that number. The authority only covered the recruitments. Many companies throughout the state, not included in the regiments named above, recruited without authority in the hope of obtaining places in those of or other regiments. They were disappointed, however, and 13 companies found service in the units of other states. By December 1861, Michigan had sent 13 infantry regiments, 3 cavalry regiments, and 5 batteries of light artillery totaling 16,475 officers and enlisted men to the Civil War front. On July 2, 1862, the War Department assigned Michigan a quota of 11,686 as part of the proclamation for 500,000 men. The regiments recruited were as follows: 21st Ionia, 22nd Pontiac, 23rd East Saginaw, and 24th from Detroit and Wayne County. I might add that these Michigan Militia buttons were dug up here in Saginaw. Continuing, though, and 24th from Detroit and Wayne County. More companies were raised than could be placed in the district regiments, so the 25th Kalamazoo and the 26th Jackson Infantry Regiments were formed and sent into the field. The 4th, 5th, and 6th Cavalry Regiments were also organized. Following the expiration of the 3-year enlistment periods at the beginning of 1864, 5,545 veterans re-enlisted, entitling the units in which they were serving to the designation of veteran. These organizations were the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Cavalry, 2nd, 5th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th regiments of infantry, and the 6th Heavy Artillery, formerly the 6th Infantry, and batteries B, C, and E, 1st Light Artillery. Because Michigan was on the Canadian border, it was continually threatened with an invasion by rebels who had found refuge in Canada and were encouraged by the Confederate government to raid the northern states. During the time of these threatened raids, Michigan relied on the following forces to defend its borders against the hostile demonstration: 6 companies of the 2nd Regiment Veteran Reserve Corps, 3 companies of the state troops, the Scott Guard, Detroit Light Guard, and Lion Guard, with a section of light artillery. At the close of the Civil War, Michigan's Colonel Benjamin Pritchard and the 4th Michigan Cavalry captured Jefferson Davis, the defeated Confederate president. From April 1861 to April 1865, Michigan furnished 90,747 men, not counting 1,982 men commuting, and 4,000 Michigan men who served in the units of other states. The 1st Michigan troops discharged from federal service, the 20th Regiment of Infantry, arrived in the state from the battlefield on June 4, 1865, and the last, the 3rd and 4th Infantry, arrived on June 10, 1866. According to official regimental commanders' reports, Michigan men engaged the enemy on more than 800 occasions. Of officers serving, 177 were killed, 85 died of wounds, and 95 died of diseases. Among the enlisted men, 2,643 were killed, 1,302 died of wounds, and 10,040 died of disease. During the war, Michigan furnished more than 30 regiments of infantry, including the 1st Colored, 102nd United States Infantry, a regiment of engineers and mechanics, light artillery of 12 6-gun batteries, 2 batteries of medium artillery, a regiment of sharpshooters, 11 regiments of cavalry. So looking at these facts, is it no wonder that President Lincoln exclaimed, "Thank God for Michigan," when told of the arrival of the 1st Michigan Volunteers in answer to his call for troops at the start of the Civil War? We, in Michigan, stepped up to the plate big time to help save the Union. Now, the one button, which says MHS, I'd like to tell you a little bit about that. It was a home for veterans. The Michigan legislature established a home for disabled soldiers, sailors, and Marines by passing Public Act 152 on June 5, 1885. The institution was part of a national effort to provide domiciliary care for Civil War veterans. The Michigan Soldiers' Home, in the words of Major and Supreme Court Justice Alan B. Morse, was the testimonial to the worth and services of her, Michigan's, sons in the war for the suppression of the rebellion and the reestablishment of a united government. A home for disabled and enfeebled veterans who lost their health and energies in defense of our homes. May it stand forever. And that is in Grand Rapids. Continuing, the Board of Managers created by Act 152 chose to build on the Nelson Farm, which was located north of Grand Rapids, and the citizens of Grand Rapids purchased 132 acres for $16,500 and deeded the property to the state of Michigan. Saginaw architect F.W. Hollister drew up the plans, and the construction contract of $99,667.57 was awarded to builder Charles Tydick, also of Saginaw. Groundbreaking occurred on March 15, 1886, and the Michigan Soldiers' Home was completed and dedicated on December 30, 1886. The state also established a cemetery on the grounds in April of 1886, and the Civil War veterans in today's, some of the photos I'm showing you here today, were photographed circa 1905 on the grounds of the Michigan Soldiers' Home. So I want to look at one more thing in regards to the Michigan home for the soldiers, and that is Uriah Gress. At the age of 23, Uriah Gress enlisted in the Army, enlisted in Company A, 6th Military Infantry, and he received a disability discharge from New Orleans on December 21, 1862. In 1864, he re-enlisted in Company H, 28th Michigan Infantry, but was again discharged for disability at Alexandria, Virginia, on May 19, 1865. After the Civil War ended, Gress returned to Lake Township, Berrien County, Michigan, and married Lucy J. Heathman in 1867. The couple had one son, Martin, who was born in Iowa in 1881, and Lucy passed in 1883. Uriah Gress entered the Michigan Soldiers' Home on September 24, 1903, at the age of 64. On his application, Gress attested that he was of sound mind, but was suffering from double hernia, broken hip, and the piles. Like all veterans, he agreed to abide by the rules of the home, perform all of the duties required, and turn over all money received by him in excess of $5 per month. Gress received a pension of $12 from the United States government monthly. When Gress died of heart disease at the Soldiers' Home Hospital February 18, 1917, his account was $17.34, which in 2010 dollars equated to $292. His casket cost $15, and the remaining money was sent to his son, Martin L. Gress of Wilmston. Both Uriah and Lucy Gress are buried at the Spalding Cemetery in Williamston, Michigan. And that's just one of many stories told of veterans who took up residence at the Michigan Soldiers' Home. And so that brings to a conclusion the material I have on this. One thing that always intrigues me or fascinates me is whenever I find a small button, or perhaps a marble, or perhaps a bottle, or some other relic or artifact. There is always so much to learn about what's behind it. And these 5 buttons in particular, so much history is behind them. The men who wore these early Michigan State Militia buttons that I'm showing you were more than likely men that left our state for the Civil War and came back home, or their uniforms came back home with the buttons intact. The buttons were all dug by my friend Barry Gill Alberg here in Saginaw, Michigan, one of the most prolific metal detectorists that I've ever known. And he's come up with some pretty amazing things, not the least of which are these 5 buttons. Thanks for taking a listen. Hope it was enjoyable for you.